Hey everyone, this is Rune Shadows, and today I'm going to give you a primer on the deck building theory for Oscilio Constella Intelligence. So in this video, I'm going to assume that you do have general game knowledge. You should know how Flesh and Blood cards work, how the turn cycles work, the game rules, that kind of stuff. I won't assume that you have Oscilio or Wizard or specific strategy knowledge necessarily, but I am going to assume you know how the cards generally work. I also just want to make it clear that for this video, the deck building goal is to make a deck that's as strong as possible in the current competitive scene. There are plenty of great reasons to play a hero that aren't just competitiveness, how fun the deck is, how much you identify with the hero, the lore, even the card art. But the goal for this video is make a case for why Oscilio can be strong in the competitive scene and try to make a deck that's as strong as possible for that. To that end, I'm going to go over Oscilio's potential, the hero and weapon, the equipment, some deck building concepts, look over some key cards for the deck, give you a demonstration of his combo, talk about a couple builds, and then finally go over the game plan. Alright, so let's start with Oscilio's potential. What makes Oscilio, to me, a hero that seems like he could be competitively viable? Well, here's a list that I've drawn up of all the things that I think Oscilio can do, and they all seem very powerful to me. Obviously, Oscilio does have a few drawbacks, which we'll touch on a little later, but I really want to start by highlighting his potential and think about the upside and the good case, and that way we can evaluate whether he even should have potential as a competitive deck. Let's say things go well. Does he even have a ceiling that's high enough to hang with the rest of the great decks in Flesh and Blood? And I think because of all these reasons, you'll see that the answer is clearly yes. So just to go through these real quick, first of all, he can play at instant speed. That's a pretty powerful effect in Flesh and Blood. Not that many decks can play instants, or play on their opponent's turn, or do all these things that you get to do when you can play at instant speed consistently. He's also got access to card draw. As we know from the recent bans, card draw is very powerful in the game, and most of the easy ways to draw cards have been taken out of the game, but Oscilio still has access to quite a lot of card draw. To go hand in hand with that, he also has a great way to filter cards, so it's not quite as strong as drawing a card outright, but filtering cards from your hand is also quite a powerful effect. It really lets you have the right hand texture a lot more consistently, and it lets you dig for your power cards that much quicker. Next, Oscilio can make action points. Most heroes in Flesh and Blood can't outright make action points. A lot of them can refresh their action points pretty consistently using Go Again. So you refresh your one action point that you have for the turn, let's say. But outright making action points isn't very easy to do, but Oscilio has multiple ways that he can do that. So that right there is worth a decent amount. Next up, we have 4 power attacks. People always refer to these as breakpoints. And yeah, we know how powerful a 4 power attack is against most cards in the game, blocking 3 or less. Obviously, there are some blocks that do block 4, but generally, if you can build a deck where a lot of the things that you're sending are hitting these breakpoints, then you're going to leak a lot more damage. Your on hits will be a lot more threatening, etc., etc. All the things that people talk about that are great for breakpoints. Next, I think he's got great access to mixed damage. Mixed damage is really powerful, as we've seen. Looking at the Runeblade class, for example, it's kind of built completely around it. Mixed damage means that your opponent has to both respect physical and arcane, and that makes it hard to do. Even from the beginning of the game, they have to decide what equipment are they going to take. Are they going to take equipment that blocks physical or equipment that blocks arcane? And typically, both of those don't exist on the same equipment, and you lose out on different abilities. If you take the arcane equipment and you have to just have Null Rune, you might lose out on some powerful equipment abilities. So forcing our opponent to make that concession, even at the very start of the game, is quite powerful, I think. Something else that adds to the mixed damage is the fact that we can do tall arcane damage. So unlike Rune Blade's mixed damage, where all of their arcane, or most of it, let's say, is one power, just one damage pings from each rune chant. For us, we're gonna stack our arcane onto a tall arcane spell, which means that a lot of the times we'll be able to do so much arcane in one source that most decks cannot block all of the arcane from that single source, and will take arcane that is basically unpreventable. So that helps leak damage through even more, and it also goes hand in hand with our next point, which is disruption. So we can add, some of our spells have disruption, and if you add that together with them being really tall arcane, it's basically unpreventable disruption. Okay, so if we can assume that Oscilio can have all of these powerful effects, then that should make him quite a strong contender in the meta, I would say. So now let's get into the cards and look at how do we make a deck that tries to fulfill all these these great things that we're trying to do. Okay, so let's start by looking at the hero and the weapon. So here's Oscilio and his signature weapon, Volzar. Both of these came out in Rosetta, and they seem to pair pretty well together. Volzar isn't his spec, let's say, but it is his signature weapon, and he's the only lightning wizard that could equip it. So seems like a great place to start when building the deck. We'll see that with the equipment too. Obviously, wizard as a class has lots of other options for staves and for equipment, but if we want to synergize all these things together, and if we want to look at some of the key cards that came out in Rosetta with Oscilio, I think we'll see that mostly the equipment in Rosetta fills the slots at a very high level and is pretty synergistic with him. So it's a good place to start, and then maybe we can find a couple places where we swap equipment or those kind of things. But generally, let's start assuming that we want to look at his sort of the equipment design for him in Rosetta. So let's quickly go over the hero. His ability is once per turn, discard an instant, draw a card. This is a pretty stock standard way to filter. It does mean we probably want to play a decent amount of instants. So let's look out for that on other cards and see if we want to also, we see some other synergies with instants, and as you'll see, we will. And then when we get to Volzar, we can see its ability, which is the most important part, is once per turn as an instant. For one cost, you can amp X, where X is the number of lightning cards you've played this turn. That is what allows you to unlock that damage stacking tall arcane that we talked about. It basically gives every lightning card you play a bonus 1 damage, but that bonus 1 damage gets stacked to the end where you amp and stack it on top of an arcane spell. You do have to have the arcane spell to cash in that damage, so it's not quite the same as a direct bonus damage, but you'll see we will try to build the deck so that we can consistently hit that. It does have another bonus ability though too, which just makes it takes it even one level higher. That's that if you control an aura permanent with sigil in its name, then it costs 1 less to activate. And you'll see we have quite a few other synergies with auras, and the sigils themselves. These aura permanent sigils, a lot of them are very good in the deck. So we end up getting this kind of for free, and everything kind of all works together to synergize well. So, all right, moving on. Let's look at the equipment. As I said, we're selecting this straight out of Rosetta. First off, all of these block 1, and the hat's blade break, but the rest are battle worn, which is just, for a wizard already, we're getting some value here. Most wizard equipment doesn't block or has 0 block, so that's a great baseline to be at. Now looking at the abilities, for Flash of Brilliance, we can see it says, when this defends, you may discard a lightning card. If you do, return an aura you control to its owner's hand. For the first part, it wants us to have lightning cards to discard. We've already seen that we probably want to play a lot of lightning cards because of Volzar, so that seems easy to fulfill. So if we do that, we get to return an aura from that we control to our hand, and that also seems like something we're going to want to do, and we'll see later that it really is, and that can be quite powerful. For Ether Bindings, its ability is as an instant, destroy it until end of turn. Whenever an aura permanent you control with sigil in its name leaves the arena, amp 1. So here's another way that we can amp, and again we've seen that we are going to be amping a lot, so again another way to stack damage, which seems quite good. And then you'll notice immediately we are already seeing one of the synergies here. This is going to amp when an aura leaves, and flash says an aura leaves. So, you know, there may be some synergies around auras leaving the board that we're going to see here, right? Finally, let's look at Lightning Greaves. Lightning Greaves kind of goes a different direction. It's not directly synergizing with stuff that we've seen already, except for that it cares about instants. So its ability is, as an instant for 1 cost, destroy it. Instant cards you play this turn get go again. So we are going to be playing a lot of instants. So that means, you know, this is pretty likely to give us some action points. But really that's the key that we care about, right? Is we're going to have a go again on an instant, and if you play an instant, it does not use your action point, but it still resolves. So when it resolves, the go again will give you an action point. So this basically makes all your instants give you action points. All right, so now that we've got that sort of framework to work with on the weapon and equipments, where do we start trying to find some power in the deck? All right, so the place that I want to start is with a couple of pretty powerful attacks that we got in Rosetta. The first one is Gone in a Flash. So this is a lightning attack, which is great already. We have a lightning card. It's a 3-block, so sure, that's great. But of course, the key part is it's a 4 attack for 0 cost. So we're hitting that breakpoint, and it's a 0 cost. The only thing we don't notice on this card that we've seen on a lot of other 0 for 4s in the past, or decks that like to play a lot of 0 for 4s, is there isn't any go again, right? Well, if we go back to Lightning Greaves, which we just looked at, it's going to give our instants go again. And then if we read Gone in a Flash, it says when this attacks, the next time you play an instant card, this chain link, you may return this to its owner's hand. So Gone in a Flash wants us to play an instant, and it doesn't have go again itself, but Lightning Greaves gives all our instants go again. So obviously we can design some sort of combo here where we play Gone in a Flash and then play an instant, and the instant makes the action point, and the Gone in a Flash is the attack with go again, right? Not only that, but the ability itself is very strong. So the way I like to think about it is, since it says you return it to your owner's hand, it's almost like the card text actually says, when you play an instant, draw Gone in a Flash, because Gone in a Flash is going to be back in your hand, right? So you can treat it like the card says draw itself, which is a really strong thing. So already we're seeing if we combine this all together, we're having an attack that's a 0 for 4. It'll get go again from the instant, and then it draws itself, and then you can play it again. So as long as you continue to have instants in your hand to play, you can keep playing Gone in a Flash basically an infinite number of times until you run out of instants. So that seems like a great combo. Not only that, is every time you're playing all these things, you're playing a bunch of lightning cards. So all of this seems like it's working together. Let's talk about this specific instant that I picked out here, because it's another power card of the deck. So this is Sigil of Brilliance. So already the instant is giving Gone in a Flash go again, and it's also a lightning card. So that's already 2 points of value that we've generated, 1 action point and 1 amp on Bullsar. So now we want to see if the text on the sigil itself makes sense. And for Sigil of Brilliance, it's sort of a slam dunk. It says draw a card on it. When cards say draw a card, you basically just put them in your deck, right? Drawing a card is really a very powerful effect. We'll talk more about how the sigils work a little later, but for now, draw a card seems great. All right, let's look at the other combo. So here, we're comboing a couple of instants with the other attack. So the other big attack from Rosetta that is really synergistic with Oscilio and really has a very strong ability on it is Blast to Oblivion. Again, we're seeing basically the same things as Gone in a Flash, except that it blocks for 2, not 3, but it's a lightning card. It's a 0 for 4. Again, it doesn't have go again in and of itself, so you are going to want to figure out some way to give it go again, or to generate an action point, like we talked about with Greaves. But let's take a look at its ability. I would argue this ability may be even stronger than Gone in a Flash, which seems crazy already because Gone in a Flash basically said draw Gone in a Flash as its ability. So Blast Oblivion, how could it possibly top that, right? Well, if we look at this combo that we've lined up with these instants, let's pop over to Electromagnetic Somersault for a second because we haven't seen that yet. It says choose up to 2 attack action cards with cost 0 or more on the active chain link. Return them to their owner's hand when the chain link resolves. So this can target Blast Oblivion because it's a 0 or more cost and it returns it to its hand. So we're kind of giving the Gone in a Flash ability to Blast Oblivion. So that means we're adding the text to Blast Oblivion of draw a Blast to Oblivion. And then on Blast Oblivion, its ability says, when this attacks, the next time you play an instant card this chain link, you may return a target or a permanent with cost 1 or less, or target or a token to its owner's hand. So we play the Electromagnetic Somersault in reactions. Blast's ability triggers. Blast's ability itself will put the Sigil of Brilliance back in our hand, and Sigil of Brilliance will draw us a card. So by playing Electromagnetic Somersault, we've essentially given Blast the text that says, draw Blast, draw Sigil of Brilliance, or whichever other, or a permanent you target, but hopefully we're targeting a Sigil of Brilliance. And then also, Sigil of Brilliance says draw a card. So this combo together, you can almost read it as draw 3 cards, where 2 of them are the best cards in your deck, Blast to Oblivion and Sigil of Brilliance, and 1 of them is just a random other card off the top of your deck. So that, in and of itself, if you read it that way, we're really talking about some very powerful stuff here. Okay, so let's move on and start sort of talking about more cards in the deck. And I'll try to go through these relatively quickly, just to give you an overview of basic cards that go in the deck, and then we'll look at a combo line at the end of the cards, just to see how this all really works together, and hopefully things will become a little more clear. Okay, so we've seen that Oscilio cares about aura sigils. He cares about spells, which I define spells as cards that are typically actions that deal arcane damage. So we want those cards that deal arcane in our deck, so spells, and then instants and lightning attacks. So let's look at some sigils here. So generally sigils are auras with start of action phase effects. They also have a leave the arena effect. Mostly what we want in the deck in order to synergize with other things will be the instant sigils and also hopefully lightning sigils. Now the text on the sigils themselves we also care about. Draw a card is great text on Sigil of Brilliance, so that makes sense. Conductivity and lightning are here because an embodiment of lightning, which you can see on the right side, gives an attack action card go again. And as we said in the just a couple slides ago, Gone in a Flash and Blast Oblivion, the sort of one downside they have compared to other, head jab like attacks or something in that kind of deck, right, is that they don't have innate go again themselves. So if you don't have Lightning Greaves, you are going to be wanting to give them go again still. So this is another way to give them go again. And then the last thing here, Sigil of Ether. Sigil of Ether is not a lightning card, but it's still an instant aura, so it synergizes with all of those things. What it does is deal an arcane damage to any target in Amp 1. I don't want to go too in-depth in the video here, but maybe I will in future videos. But this actually, because it says any target, has quite a few little nuances. But generally, you can see this as we're, again, dealing split damage to our opponent by dealing them an arcane ping, and then we're also potentially amping. So, again, amping is powerful because we get to stack that arcane. Okay. Next up, let's talk about spells. So, spells are what let us do arcane damage. And then, hopefully, besides just the basic arcane damage, it would be nice to have our spells do something else in addition. And so that's how we're kind of picking spells that go in the deck. We want to look for other effects that synergize well with the deck. So one of the best ones is Etchings of Arcana. Its surge ability says, if you deal more than 3 damage, return an aura with sigil in its name from your graveyard to your hand. This is really amazing, right? We're basically, if we can surge this, we get, again, you can think about this text as it says, draw a sigil from your graveyard, which if you have a Sigil of Brilliance in graveyard, this text just says draw a Sigil of Brilliance, right? So, and then Sigil of Brilliance is an instant, so you could play it if you want to, you could arsenal it. There's, lots of options, right? So this really is great text. Another one that seems interesting is Glyph Overlay. This hasn't made the cut in a lot of competitive lists because it is a little bit clunky for setup. It also costs 1, and as you'll see, most of the cards we've looked at so far, and many of the cards we'll see later, are 0 cost, so it is sometimes hard to pay costs in this deck. But still, it's going to synergize with the sigils. They do go into your deck, not into your hand, so it's not quite as powerful as something like Etchings, which kind of says draw a sigil. Glyph kind of says recycle your sigils, get their effects, but you don't really draw from it, so that's another downside. However, it does do more arcane total, so maybe that's an upside. Next, we have some of the generic wizard actions that are, the older wizard actions, and they don't, they're not from Rosetta. They don't really synergize directly with Oscilio, but these are kind of the targets that we want on the end of the chain when we are stacking that tall arcane damage. So Mind Warp is disruption. It takes a card from your opponent's hand essentially, and then Spindle is going to opt, which lets us really stack some nice turns. If you can make Spindle come in for a lot, you're going to be looking at quite a few cards. I've had Spindles come in for 8 or 10 or even more, and then you really are setting yourself up nicely, and just it adds a ton of consistency to the deck. So yeah, opting a lot there is quite powerful. Okay, next up, let's talk quickly about the split cards. So Rosetta introduced split cards, and Oscilio got 2. So first, Comet Storm Shock. If you play and meld it, it's both things, right? And also while it's in your hand, it's both things. So you can filter this with Oscilio if you need to. And then otherwise, it's just a 2 for 5 arcane if you're only playing Comet Storm. So it is just a tall arcane spell, which is, again, hard to block. It does have a high cost, but it does have some really neat play where you can play Shock on your opponent's turn, or you can play Shock to be the instant if you need instants for your turn. And occasionally you do end up melding it if you just have extra resources. So it's a great thing. It's a great way to pitch and get cards out of your hand if you need to. So yeah, overall, Comet Storm Shock is a great way to just get more arcane damage through. Null Shock is quite interesting and a lot more nuanced. Maybe that's something also to save for a later video, but Null says, we have all the benefits here of Shock, except it's a 1-cost Shock that we talked about with Comet Storm Shock. So arcane to any target and at instant speed. But then Null is where it gets interesting. You can negate an instant, and that does come up sometimes against certain decks. So a lot of times you're just playing this as a yellow and a Shock instant, but occasionally the Null will do some really powerful things, like you could negate a Chi that your opponent played, or a Transcend card, so then they don't get the Chi, something like that. So there are a few instances that are very good targets for something like Null. And then I just wanted to reiterate again that the split cards are really great in Oscilio because when they're in your hand, they are instants. So they let you have a spell in your hand, but they never clog your hand, because you can always filter them away with Oscilio if it's not the right spell that you need or you can't pay for them for some reason. So I think these make the cut. All right, let's look at some instants. We already saw Electromagnetic Somersault, but I do want to say for this one, and maybe I'll make a whole video just on some of these weird rules interactions, really read this card carefully. So choose up to 2 attack action cards with cost 0 or more on the active chain link, and then return them to their owner's hand when the chain link resolves. So it's key that you play this and choose the cards, but they don't return immediately when you play this. It's not like Gone in a Flash, where as soon as you play the instant, Gone triggers to come back to your hand. This just selects the cards when you play it, and then they return during chain link resolution. The way that they return is at the start of resolution. This is a delayed trigger that goes off at that point. So you can't play Electromagnetic Somersault during resolution because the time that it would trigger has already passed. You have to play this in reactions so that it gets the trigger at the start of resolutions. That is one thing just to look out for, and make sure that you always play that in reactions if you need the Somersault ability. The other thing is you'll see it says up to 2, so that's kind of weird because it's only a chain link. How can you have 2 attack action cards on a chain link? Well, you don't just have to use this card offensively, which would just be 1 attack action. You can actually use it defensively too, so you can block with 2 attack actions, and then defensively in reactions, put the attack actions, select the attack actions, and then after damage, when you go to resolutions, the cards will have blocked their damage and then return to your hand in resolutions. This is another point though, where again, maybe this card, it's quite complicated and maybe deserves its own video. There are some heroes like New that have their own things that are going to trigger during resolution, namely stealth cards, banishing cards, and New will be the active player, so she's going to banish your cards before this goes off. So, even there, like, be pretty careful with this card, which cards you're selecting, whether your opponent can somehow make it so you don't actually get those cards back, even though you think you should. All right, that's enough time on Somersault. Let's go through the rest here quickly. Electrostatic Discharge says the next attack action card gets +3, so that's just sort of a straight 0 for 3 value on here, plus all the other value of it being a lightning card and an instant card. Channel Lightning Valley says draw a card. This is another one that does have some, interesting sequencing stuff that you do need to watch out for, because it says the first time you deal damage to an opposing hero, draw a card. But again, maybe I'll save that for another video. And then, Blink just says gain an action point. So again, it's a lightning instant, and you're getting immediately 1 value on the action point as long as you can use that action point. And it's a blue, so this just adds, again, a way that the deck generates action points without using Go Again. So it's not just refreshing an action point, it can just make you an action point when you need it. All right, moving on. So lightning attacks. We do want to fill out the deck with some other lightning attacks. You won't always be doing a combo turn, so let's select some good attacks. I've selected a couple here that kind of synergize well with things, so I'll briefly touch on how they work. Flittering Charge, 0 for 4, which is great, as we've seen. And then this one, you don't get it back to your hand like Gone, but instead you get Go Again, so definitely less value than Gone, but still quite good, because you can pretty much always make this a 0 for 4 with Go Again. Eclectic Magnetism is a 1 cost for 5, which at first seems a little weird, but then you'll notice for its ability it says you can play a non-attack action card this chain link as though it were an instant. So it is actually making you an action point in a way. If you have a spell in your hand, you can play Eclectic, and then either in reactions or after damage and resolutions, play a spell. And if you remember, also Volzar is an instant, right? So you can always activate Volzar as well. So Eclectic really lets you set up some turns where maybe you don't have another way to get Go Again or an action point. It's pretty rare, but maybe you have none of your cards that make action points and none of your Go Again cards. You can still play a mixed damage turn where you go taller with Arcane by playing Eclectic, because you can play out some lightning instants, like play a Sigil, play Eclectic, now Volzar's up to 2, then play a spell. So you've done 5 physical plus 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, depending which spell it is, Arcane. So pretty great. And then finally, Current Funnel. Current Funnel is a really awesome card as well. It doesn't have innate Go Again as we've seen before on a lot of cards, but it does. Its ability does potentially generate you 2 action points, which can be quite powerful. So Current Funnel is great when you're not doing a Greaves turn. It can be almost like another mini combo turn where as long as you play a lightning card with Go Again as your first action card, it'll give itself Go Again and then the next action Go Again. And one thing to call out here is the first one does have to be lightning, but the next one that it's giving Go Again can be any action. So you can play lightning card, current funnel, lightning action card, current funnel, and then spell, or a combination of a bunch of different things. So it's really a powerful turn extender. Okay, I think that's enough on attacks. Let's move on to some of the synergistic, some other synergistic cards that aren't lightning. So as we look at these support cards, basically what we're looking for is just high value outside of the fact that they get value from stuff we've already synergized with. So If we look at E-Strike is here because it's just a good attack where anytime you can give it go again or make an action point, E-Strike's text basically becomes a 0 for 5. Because, the card you bottom, instead you can choose draw a card. So, since you already have your action point, so then instead of just bottoming a card and losing a card from your hand and it being a 2-card 5, or, maybe a 2-card 7, now it's a 1-card 5 because you've replaced the card by drawing. So, yeah, that's a great rate. And then Sigil of Solace is cool. It's an instant that always gets 3 value because you can pretty much always heal 3. Note that even though it says Sigil, it's not a permanent, so it doesn't work with a bunch of the other Sigil effects in the deck, but in and of itself, it's just an instant that gains 3, which is nice. And then Entwine Lightning, note this is not a lightning card, but still, it does synergize well with other lightning cards in the deck. It's just another 0 for 4 that pretty much always we can give it go again. Alright, so now that we've looked through all these other supporting cards, I just want to call you back to what we're really talking about in this deck, like what the main power generators for the deck are, which are Blast to Oblivion and Gone in a Flash. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you a demonstration of the combo, and yeah, let's move over to that. Okay, so now we're looking at TTS here. I've got the deck loaded up and a sample hand. I have curated this, so we're going to do a crazy, top of the line combo. I think it is good to take a look at this just so you can see that if there's a way to make this always line up, Oscilio can do some of the most powerful stuff of any deck. We'll note later that that consistency is definitely sort of the downside with Oscilio, but there's, no denying that he can do powerful stuff. So we're starting here with Gone in a Flash and Arsenal, and we're going to play through a combo turn and just see how much damage we can do, and I'll kind of explain how a lot of the interactions work with some of the power cards we've looked at before. Okay, so the way we normally start our combo turn is we'll play Gone in a Flash. You can play Gone in a Flash and do nothing else because all your other stuff you can do at instant speed. So yeah, you can just put this out and make your opponent have to decide whether this is the turn you're going off or not. Usually if you've kept a full grip and you just put the Gone in a Flash out there, that does kind of signal it, but still it doesn't always mean that you're going off. You might have a blink or something. So yeah, you always want to start with Gone in a Flash. Now let's move a die over here. We've played 1 lightning card, so we're going to want to count these for Volzar. Okay, so we walk through, blocks, reactions. We've done 4, let's say. We're just going to pretend there's no blocks here and just sort of look at the cap on damage. Okay, so yeah, 4, go to resolutions. Now in resolution step, we're going to pop Tunic for a resource and immediately use that to break Lightning Greaves. You'll see, or you'll remember Lightning Greaves says instant cards you play get go again this turn. So now we're going to be making an action point every time we play an instant. So essentially we'll get to keep our combo line going. Alright, we're going to start by playing Sigil of Brilliance since we want that on the board since it draws once we combo with Blast. So we'll do that. Go up to 2 lightning cards played, and then that will trigger Gone in a Flash, which says when you play an instant this chain link, which we just did, we played Sigil of Brilliance, return it to its owner's hand. So there we go. Alright, so now we still have our action point. It's refreshed because we played Sigil. So now what we want to do is play Blast. The reason we want to do that is Blast's ability is going to let us return the Sigil of Brilliance to our hand, which will draw us a card. So now we're threatening 4 again, so let's tick this up. Actually, almost made a mistake here, right? We have to play Electromagnetic Somersault in reactions. Let's make sure we're tracking Volzar, so that's 2 more, so we're up to 4. So Electromagnetic will play, we'll target Blast with it, so now Blast will return to us during resolutions, but it's a delayed trigger, so Electromagnetic can go over here. Blast ability is on the stack, so we'll use that to return Sigil of Brilliance, so we'll put Sigil of Brilliance back in our hand, then we'll draw a card from our deck, and then we'll do 4 damage, and then Blast will go back to our hand. Okay, so now we're going to play Gone in a Flash again. we're going to do the same thing we kind of just did, where we gone in a flash, and since we want the sigil out before we blast, we're going to get an extra chain link of gone, bouncing with sigil, and then bounce the sigil with the blast, right? So play gone, play the sigil to bounce gone, record the damage here, and then this goes to 6 for the sigil, and then next chain link we're going to play blast. Now we need another die over here. And then for blast, this time we don't have to target with like we did with electromagnetics. So let's say we just do the damage, and then in resolutions play electrostatic, target the sigil. This will go back to hand. We'll draw a card. Let's remember that we have +3 on the next attack. Unfortunately, blast doesn't go to our hand, but that's okay. Cool. We drew another blast, so now we can keep going. Leave that on the chain. And then, cool. So now we do the same thing that we've done before. Play gone, it's for 7, so. And then in resolutions, play the sigil, put gone back in our hand. Play blast. Play the other sigil, put sigil of brilliance back in our hand. Record the damage, draw a card. And then that sigil of lightning we need to count. We're gonna need another die here. And then here, oh wow, we've drawn a spell. That's great. Now we have a way to cash in Volzar. And another thing to note here is it's gonna be free, right? Because Mind Warp is free. Volzar is gonna be free because we have a sigil of lightning on the board. So its ability will make it cost 0. So we don't even need to keep a card to pitch or anything. We can keep going with chain links and pump it even higher. So let's put Gone in a Flash out. That'll go to 13 here. And then put the Sigil of Brilliance out, and then put Gone in a Flash back in our hand. So now we're to 14, and then we'll play Mind Warp and activate Volzar. So now we're coming in for Mind Warp for 14, and I think I forgot to track the damage for... Let's see, we did 23 was when we go in a flash, so yeah, so it should just be 31 and then plus 14. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. So yeah, up to 45, right? 14 plus 31, yep. Okay, cool. So now we've done 45 damage. Hopefully I didn't mess up the math there. And then let's also evaluate a couple other things. So Mind Warp says if it deals more than 2 damage, and we're dealing 14 with it, or sorry, 16 with it, right? Oh, so it's 2 more here, right? Yeah, it's 16, 2 from the Mind Warp itself. So 16 arcane from one source is basically impossible for any deck to block unless they just have a ton of prevention or a ton of ward on the board maybe, or something like that. So really this is going to be difficult, especially since it comes after all these other chain links. So your opponent's probably not going to have a bunch of cards in hand. So, you know, if they've blocked, then maybe Mind Warp isn't the best spell that we want to have here. But if they haven't, because they're trying to come back with their own combo turn, then we get this disruption as well. So they lose a card, so that's potentially 3 value. The other thing is we're ending our turn and we get to Arsenal Gone in a Flash. It's still in our hand because it popped back the last time we played it. So let's do that. And then the other thing is you'll notice we on the board have a Sigil of Lightning and a Sigil of Brilliance. So not only do we do this crazy huge combo, we're basically set up for another combo turn the very next turn. We have Gone in a Flash in Arsenal, and we have an embodiment that's going to get made by the Sigil of Lightning and Sigil of Brilliance to draw us another card. So we're going to have another 6-card hand starting the turn with Go again. So let's draw 4 cards here. Okay, so now that we're drawing another card, or sorry, now that we go to our next turn, I guess we should tick Tunic, might as well, don't forget that. And then, yeah, we can see here that these crack, and then maybe we crack Ether Bindings, so now we're going to amp from that, so that's 2 more amp here. And then we drew a spell, right? So it probably makes sense to crack Ether because we will be able to cash in on it. And then we get an embodiment of lightning. And then I'll just leave this here to represent that for a second. And then we draw a card, so let's draw this other card. So you can see here we can do something like Gone in a Flash. It'll have Go again from the embodiment. I don't think I have an embodiment token, sorry about that, but it just says the next attack you play gets Go again. So it destroys itself to give Go again to the Gone in a Flash. And then here you have to make sure you go to resolutions to get Go again, so don't put Gone in a Flash back in your hand in reactions. Let the damage through and then play something like, let's say, Blink. So we play Blink. That's the second lightning card we've played. Oops, sorry. That's the second lightning card we've played. Now we have 2 action points, one from the Go again and one from the Blink. Gone will go back to our hand. Now we play Gone again, let's say, use one of the action points, then put it back in our hand with, let's say, Electrostatic Discharge, and then now we have 1 action point left. So I guess maybe we lost some value on Electrostatic, so maybe we should have used something else, but not a huge deal. Now we can play both these sigils. Volzar will go up to 5. Was it 6 from the Electrostatic, I think, right? Like, we played Gone, Bounce It, Gone, Bounce It, and 2 here, yeah. So 6, and then we could play the Etchings, and then Etchings will come in for 6. We have the sigils, so this is free again. We don't even have to pitch our Gone in a Flash. We can again arsenal the Gone in a Flash. And then we'll do 8 plus 3, so this is 11 more Arcane. And we did 4, 4, right? So 8 plus 11 Arcane. So we're coming in for 19 damage. Plus, Etchings says if you deal more than 3, which it probably will because we're doing so much, we can get a sigil from Graveyard back to our hand. So I think we have a Sigil of Lightning, right? So we can put this here. We can even play that immediately, or we could Oscilio it away if we want to try to draw something else. Maybe we choose the Sigil of Brilliance and put that out instead, depending on the situation. And then Arsenal Gone in a Flash, and now next turn, we don't have the action point available right now, but we do have 2 Sigil of Brilliances cracking, so we'll have a 7-card hand to start our next turn. So you can see how this really just, not only does it do a very big Gone in a Flash, a big Lightning Greaves combo turn where you get all the action points, you keep Gone in a Flash around and you're doing some setup, so you really snowball it into multiple huge combo turns in a row. Okay, so let's go back to the deck real quick and talk about a couple other things with the deck, which are more about game plan and how do we even set up this combo and that kind of thing. Okay, so going over a little bit about Oscilio Builds, there are sort of 2 things, and it sort of dictates what chest piece that you want to bring. So there's the combo focused build and the more mid-rangey build. In the combo focused build, you are probably going to run more Blasts to Oblivion, and you're going to try to focus on a single turn maximum damage, kind of like what we just showed, where you don't just do 2 Blasts, maybe you do 3 or 4 and just really combo. If you have 2 Sigil of Brilliances, and you keep drawing into Blast to Oblivion, you can keep comboing basically infinitely until you run out of cards, until you run out of blasts or run out of cards in deck or cards in hand, right? But you're continuously drawing, right? So you can really cycle this combo quite a few times. So because of that, you basically want to always be ready to combo, even turn 1 or turn 2 of the game, because you're very likely to always draw, or you're much more likely to draw Blast because you're playing more Blasts in the deck. So Blossom of Spring helps with that because you can always gain the 1 resource you need to pop Greaves without using a card from hand. Whereas with Tunic, you have to wait 3 turns at least. So for the Tunic build, it's a little bit more mid-rangey. It's not exactly a mid-range deck, but what you're going to do is play more blocking cards, including some D-Reacts, especially into aggro, and that lets you maximize value before you get to your combo turn and really make sure that you can set up, and you're also less vulnerable to disruption. So even though the ceiling is not as high because it's not a pure combo build, you are less vulnerable to disruption, right? You have more consistency, you get to see more hands during the game, so it's I think it's a more consistent overall way to play if you're trying to make the deck competitive. Okay, so let's talk quickly through that mid-rangey game plan. Basically, turn 0 to 2 before the tunic is up, you play efficient hands, doing some blocking, and try to set up some sigils, and then maybe a channel Lightning Valley that's going to be alive on your turn 3 for that extra draw. And then you also want to try to get Gone in a Flash or Blast into Arsenal if you can. Then turns 3 or 4, depending on your setup, you try to combo for at least 3 links of Gone in a Flash with 3 instants, and then end with a spell for at least 5 amps, so 12 physical or more, and at least 8 arcane, plus you get to keep Gone in a Flash. So we already sort of went through this on the combo turn. And then turns 5 through 8, you're trying to play as many 3 to 5 link wide turns, basically, and then end in a spell to keep tempo. Basically, you're aiming for turns like Gone in a Flash with the embodiment, plus bounce it, plus a current funnel, something like that. And, I showed you that a little bit after the big combo turn we did. You can still keep going. Basically, anything that pushes 5 to 10 physical or 4 to 8 arcane with some upside is a great turn. And then turns 8 plus, your opponent should be very low at this point, if not already dead. So try to do one more setup turn for a final push, or just keep chipping them down depending on the deck you're playing against. Maybe find a spot to shock them for lethal on their own turn, get in that instant speed arcane, or some other way to close out the game. You do have to change this game plan a little bit when playing against CYB and Fatigue. CYB has been nerfed a little bit, but I think it might still be present in the meta, and we'll have to do some more testing against that. But if your opponent really is going hard Fatigue, you might have to pitch stack a combo, basically the big combo that we just talked about, so that you can really maximize the amount of damage that you're pushing. Just keep that in mind, that there is some amount that this game plan has to change depending on how your opponent approaches the game. Cool. Thank you so much for watching. That's all I have for you today. I hope it was a good primer for Oscilio. I hope it makes you excited to play the hero. I hope it showed you the potential that Oscilio really has, and why I think if people spend more time deck building with him, and there's more Oscilio specialists, then we'll eventually figure out a build where it really is super competitive. I think we've already got builds that are pretty competitive. I know he hasn't done super well among opinion of a lot of other content creators in tiers and stuff. He's definitely got some consistency issues some of the time, but I think we've done a good job to try to mitigate that. And I personally will be bringing Oscilio this weekend to Calling Portland, hoping to do well there, so we'll see. But really putting things to the test. In the future, I hope I can make a few more Oscilio videos, go deeper on a couple of the cards that I touched on here, and on more of the strategy, maybe do some gameplay reviews, so look out for that. And again, thank you for watching.